Okay, welcome again, guys. Welcome to our webinar series that we've been having during this COVID-19 period. We started back in April and we offered these webinars weekly at the time. As some of us are starting to go back to work, we have switched the frequency to bi-weekly. The webinars will still be on topics which are selected to help build awareness of improvement methodologies and tools that we have used in past. Today's topic is on rapid and sustainable continuous improvement at a Canadian mine. Mike is here to help us talk to that. It is being presented again by myself, Haroon, and Mike. I'll start with a bit of introduction of me and Haroon because he's not here. I'm a founding member of ANI. I have about 15 to 20 years experience in mining and petroleum industry. My operational experience has been in operational excellence, continuous improvement, constraint modeling, process performance management. I have a PhD in mine operation research, and I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. As I said earlier, Haroon is having some technical difficulties, but he's part of this talk. So a bit on Haroon, he's been part of integral continuous improvement team with ANI, and his part, as you can see today, has been pivotal to deliver quality results. He's a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and is a McMaster University alumni. In his 5-year career, he's been for almost 3 years with us. And he, as I said, been part of this project, so we'll get him to talk to his part on this. Mike, you want to introduce yourself a bit?
Sure. Thank you, Awesome. My name is Mike Jankowski. I work with Hudbay Minerals for almost 10 years now. My vocation is electronics engineering, but during my 25 years in mining, a quarter century already, my positions have varied from electrical assembly on mobile equipment to a mobile equipment engineer on the electrical side. The electrics are the boss of the machine, and to IT architecture. And now I'm currently the manager of technology development with Hudbay. My focus is kind of dual in that I work with process improvement projects with the mines and the mills, and I also facilitate the creation of the company's technology roadmap as it pertains to mines and mills technology. Thank you, Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. As Mike said, he's got quite a good background there, and it's been pivotal in driving some of the continuous improvement stuff. On today's topic, all three of us have been part of this journey at Lalor with the Hudbay Minerals from the beginning. We started in late 2018 at the Lalor Mine, and each one of us will walk us through our contribution to this rapid improvement that was achieved and sustained. Before I get into the presentation, a little bit on the structure of our talk. Just like in the past, we'll start with the presentation on the topic. While presentation is occurring, you can ask any questions that you may have in the questions tab on the right side of your screen. We'll keep an eye on the questions during presentation, and then we'll try our best to answer them at the end. As again in past, we will also have an opportunity to talk face-to-face for those who want to discuss any further questions or are interested in discussing other points relevant to the talk through a Google Meet session after the webinar. The link is in the chat window if you want to attend the socializing piece of our webinar. Let me load the presentation and then we'll get started. Hi, welcome to our talk on rapid production gains at Lalor Mine by focusing on sustainable continuous improvement concepts. This presentation is authored by three people, myself, Haroon, and Mike Jankowski. So a little bit on the Lalor Mine. It's an underground mine producing gold, zinc, and copper. It's located very close to the town of Snow Lake, and is approximately about 200 kilometer by road to Flin Flon. That's the closest airport. The deposit is volcanic massive sulfides. They're subdivided into two different groups. One is the copper zinc rich, containing copper zinc and copper zinc gold, and then the other one is zinc copper rich, which is zinc lead copper and silver. They started with the post pillar mining, and then moved eventually to long hole and they also have a bit of transverse waste mining. The context of this presentation, we in late 2018, Hudbay conducted an assessment to identify continuous improvement opportunities. They wanted to get the throughput up to 4,500 tons per day consistently. Analyze, improve, assist the Hudbay in understanding the challenges of then current processes from one, collection and analysis of historical data, and two, from the observational information that we collect from the underground mine. The goal of this assessment was to identify an improvement roadmap where we can increase to 4,500 tons per day, but do it rapidly and then keep it sustained. So we started with interviews and conversations with the leadership, managers, superintendents, supervisors, then the people who actually face the problems, miners, planners, and anybody else who is a key supplier or customer of the process. The idea was to determine current barriers to production and then the value of addressing each, so some kind of potential. Direct observations were made to quantify value-adding, non-value-adding, and waste activities. A little bit more on that in a second. But we were trying to look at through the perspective of time, tonnage, and the change management, human factors. So a little bit on the methodology that we used. A assessment, as I talked to, was conducted over a week to 10 days. And what we did is we observed not only the historical data, but all the processes, including primary production processes, such as drilling, loading, mucking, hauling, and also auxiliary processes, such as blast clearance, fueling, lining up of crews, maintenance, construction, the leadership processes, such as frontline supervising, management meetings, planning meetings, daily process management routines. Also a bit on what metrics were being used and what was existing problem-solving methodology.
Thank you, Awesome. Improvement projects employ an approach of working harder, when in fact, gains can be more valuable if we work smarter. So the approach that's used in this way of working is to target non-value added and waste, not just work harder. So we look at what kind of barriers are in the way of working. And if you look down on the bottom left, where you see major improvement, more improvement can be had by reducing non-value added and waste time. Some non-value added time is necessary, but we seek to understand it and minimize it and go after the waste. The result is a greater improvement overall. So applying this way of working at our Lalor mine, we actually went underground several times to kind of categorize the time that is being spent and our current process performance and what types of non-value added time and waste did we have so that we could address the top barriers, so to speak. Awesome.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And in addition to that, as we were looking at value-added, non-value-added, and waste, we were trying to categorize the opportunities or the issues into the OEE factors, or the overall equipment effectiveness. They're made up of availability, utilization, quantity, and quality. And what this helps us do is pinpoint where to focus the improvement. Again, when we get to the potential side, we'll spend a little bit more time on that. Okay, so this graphic shows us where we started. The first bar on the left side, the green, the big bar is the potential of the mine was back in 2018 if we were at 100% OEE or 100% efficient with no losses. What 128 means is 128 buckets per shift. And the target of 4,500 tons per day that we were trying to achieve actually equates to about 125 buckets per shift. With some assumptions like value-added hours are 8 hours per shift, we can get 10 buckets per hour, and each bucket is about 18 tons. What we found is there was about a loss of 16 buckets a shift under availability, another 11 buckets loss under utilization, then a 5 buckets per hour loss on quantity, So this is more about getting close to that 10 buckets per hour. And then finally, there was a loss of about 3 buckets per shift on getting to 18 tons per bucket, or quality waste. Right? So it's about the tonnage factor. So the very last bar on the right side, the 93, is where we actually were when we started with the assessment. So 93 buckets per shift. Here are some of the opportunities, again, broken down into the OEE categories. Stope prep was an issue. So the opportunity is to get stopes prepped, be it drilling, loading, or mucking, on time or ahead of time. Keeps drills turning. Obviously, it's a availability issue in mucking. So if you don't have the tonnes reserve, the meter reserves, then tons cannot be produced. And same thing for once you've drilled the stopes, we need to blast them. Underutilization a little bit came on how we can utilize the hours between breaks, lunches, so can relief crew be utilized for priority stopes. And then other non-value-added stuffs like fueling, parking strategy, so we can get to the work faster and keep at work later. Blast clearance. And then our quantity, if we're talking about mucking, it's about mucking strategy on how many trucks to use, how many are we mucking to rock breaker farther away from the stope, then maybe you want to use less trucks. Or so if it's closer, you want to use more trucks, and if it's closer, you want to use less trucks. Where the remuck is for each stope, where the trucks are going to get loaded by the scoop, and on the route where the trucks are going to bypass them. And the aim here is to reduce the non-value-added time as much as possible and increase the value-added time. All this needs to be part of the strategy before we go start mucking. So under quality, this is more about bringing that bucket fill factor up. So number of buckets. If we have oversize, how do we handle the oversize? How do we break it? If it's going to impact the buckets, how do we tackle it? Here's a snapshot of a roadmap which was put in place after that assessment. So starting late in December, early Jan, there were a series of initiatives put in place. At the same time, there were some management system components put in place, like measuring the right KPIs, doing response and control, to build the sustainability. A little bit more of that is going to come in later in the presentation. And then, Mike, you want to talk to this slide?
Sure. So we know that any improvements that we make, they must stand the test of time. We're not interested in seeing a blip on the radar while we are present and then not care about what happens after. I mean, I work for Hudbay, so that's just not going to play. So the best practice that we brought to bear is in the Kaizen format. And so Kaizen itself literally translates into change for the better. And the approach that is taken, which is popular in the mining industry for good reason, is to make a step change improvement. So identify increments of improvement, targeting those which are the most impactful barriers first, and then taking some time to lock them in. So we would design a workshop and we would execute it, and we would allow a defined period of time that's agreed with the site to ensure that the way of working can change and that the lessons that were learned can be, shall we say, cascaded through the different crews before we proceed with the next change. Otherwise, the rate of change is too great and does not stand the test of time. So the key is to lock in the change at each step or increment of improvement. Awesome.
Thanks, Mike. So using that approach of Kaizens, the very first 3 initiatives were all Kaizen events in 3 different areas. The first one was the lineup. We say lineup, what we mean is every crew has to be lined up. So if you can focus on every crew's common non-value-added waste activities, then we can bring the potential throughput or potential value-added hour up rapidly. So here we looked at setting normal normal expected ranges of value-added hours for all the processes, establishing mucking strategies and fueling equipment accordingly, if we have a fuel truck or not, if we have relief crew or not, how far are they, are we leaving the equipment in stope or not, blast clearance process, so can we gain some time there, getting personnel to work and back. So obviously that's very common for all the crews. Depends on what vehicles are available, how far they have to go, what priority they are, where their equipment is actually parked. Organization of key storages and inventory management, big issue if you don't have the gear that you need when you need it. And then another important piece here was supervisor handover communication to make sure that a crew leaving, or let's say a day crew leaving, a night crew coming on, with the proper communication so they have the priorities aligned. In mucking, it became all about making sure the prep, still prep is done ahead of time, and when the mucking needs to start, it starts. There's two types of mucking. There's manual mucking and remote mucking happens at Lalor, so we need to do same thing for both. The prep is a bit different because remote mucking requires a little bit extra steps. Identification of optimal remucks, loadout and turnaround areas for trucks, as I talked about earlier, but the idea is that they're part of the stope prep. So you're not doing this on the first day when you start mucking, you're doing it ahead of time. Standard on fixing a bad road area to prioritize the use of roadbed. A roadbed is obviously a limited quantity. Mine is remote, so it's not easy to get there. So we need to use that material in the best place possible. So there was a standard set to make sure that we're using it for the right place, not just putting it willy-nilly everywhere. Creation of rock breaker standard to alleviate the turnover entry-level issue. So this is the entry-level position at Lalor. It causes some concern because people move in and out quick. And as a new person comes in, it takes time, there's a learning curve, and then you may have trucks backing up at the rock breaker. So a standard was created to alleviate that problem, where some tips and tricks can be passed on to the new guy quickly. In drilling and loading, similar to mucking, the stope needs to be prepped, right? So standardization of site prep activities, both for drilling and loading. Standardization of information on prints. So this is to make sure there's no confusion between planner to planner to the driller, and drillers know exactly what they're looking at the prints and they can start drilling. Better way to tie the caps to minimize issues of delays in blasting. Straightforward. Housekeeping, gear and equipment availability, and then obviously better communication of short-term plan activities to the miner. All that would help get our value-added hours out. So here's a snapshot of where we ended up after the 3 Kaizens. On the right side, you see 3,300 tons almost. That's where the average was. This is a chart called ANOVA, or analysis of variance in statistical sense. And what it looks at is if you're trying to compare before versus after, if those 2 bars do not touch, then you have a good statistical confidence that the improvement you're looking at is real. And as you can see here, we went from 3,300 tons to almost 4,000 tons. So there was an improvement of about 700 tons there, and it was statistically significant. Another way to look at it is to a chart like this. This is called a control chart. What it shows you here is variation from day to day in this case. And again, before versus after, you can see there's a shift in the tons being produced. And more importantly, as you can see, after in February, there's a period of tonnage which is all shifting up. So those points marked 2 or in red in the after basically are signaling another change improvement is happening, or it's trying to say, statistically speaking, you have made another change in process. I'm going to hand this over to Haroon now.
Thank you, Asim. So once we had gone ahead and made the improvements to the Kaizen event and set the new standards, the next step was to make sure those improvements are sustainable, and also to set up a system in place so we continue seeking out the next level of improvement so we can push our process even further. So we began by shifting our focus to the mucking process and setting some attainable value-added hours, a range of attainable value-added hours based on those improvements. In this case, it was 7 to 9 hours for each of the scoop, truck, and the rock breaker. And anytime we were below those 7 hour, the lower limit, we asked what went wrong that day, and then we recorded that. And if we were above the 9 hours, we looked to see what was the opportunity we were missing out on, so we can repeat that and hopefully push our process to the next level of improvement. So for the overall process, we noticed one of the biggest wastes was one equipment waiting on another equipment, so the wait on process waste. And then we actually spent most of our time looking at the scoop waste Pareto analysis, because scoop was a bottleneck for our process. We wanted to solve the problems here first, so that the impact could be seen across the entire mucking cycle. So for the scoop itself, the biggest waste by far was a breakdown of the scoop. So anytime the scoop was unable to do value-added work as a result of the hose being blown, remote not working, or any sort of issue that caused it to prevent from working. Also, the next waste for the scoop was waiting on a truck. So just essentially waiting on other equipment waste. The hours you see there, the 7.27 hours for the breakdown and the 4.15 hours for the truck, those are not per shift, but rather a total number of hours we lost over a 68-hour observation for the scoop equipment. So for the scoop breakdowns, to minimize those breakdowns, we went ahead and put up some standards in place to avoid any band-aid fixes, because when we did the band-aid fixes, just to keep mucking for that shift, it did hurt us, more long-term down the road. So we wanted to avoid any band-aid fixes. Also, we put some actions in place to review their preventative maintenance plans, see if there was any opportunity there. And because one of the largest reasons why breakdowns, we lost time due to breakdowns, was actually issues with remotes, whether it be programming issues or batteries. So we went ahead and investigated, and then actually set aside separate chargers and batteries for each of the operators, make sure they had ownership and their batteries were always charged, so they didn't have any issues with that. Also, to reduce the actual repair times once the breakdown did happen, we put some standards in place to make the scoop a priority. So even if a mechanic was amid another job with another equipment, it would be rediverted to come fix the scoop, as it is a primary production equipment. Also, if additional parts were needed for the repair, instead of the mechanic himself running to the mechanic shop, he could continue diagnosing and working on the equipment, while the scoop operator whose scoop is being fixed up, would be the one doing the nipping in this case. Also, to reduce delays for the scoop, like waiting on their equipment and whatnot, we went ahead and set some rules in place so the scoop operator was able to get to his work heading as quick as possible, because we noticed we were losing almost half an hour at the beginning of each shift for the scoop operator. This was due to, if the scoop was parked in the work heading, he was getting a ride with a Toyota, so he wasn't always priority because of the carpooling, so he lost a little bit of time there. Even if the scoop was bringing his equipment back to the refuge, we lost time because we were sometimes blocked in by other equipment. We lost sometimes up to an hour a day just to, trying to get the scoop freed up so he could go to his work heading. So one of the ways we eliminated that was that if we had a designated parking spot and the scoop was able to get to its work heading as soon as possible. Also, in order to reduce overall waste for the entire cycle, we looked at our individual mucking routes. So from the stope to the rock breaker, if we noticed that it was a lot of chunky muck coming from a stope and it was a short haul, we didn't want too many trucks on there, because as chunky muck comes through, it just puts delays at the rock breaker, because it takes the operators at the rock breaker a bit of time to get that muck through. Versus if it was really fine muck and it was a long route, you want to put a lot of your trucks on that route. And we put a system in place where the operators could update the supervisors through shift, so that they could make these optimizations between different routes as needed, just to kind of eliminate some of that waiting waste that we had happen throughout the shift. So I'm just going to pass it over to Mike, and go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. So looking forward to our future plans, currently we have met our 4,500 ton per day production target from Lalor Mine, and it's just a number to some, but the fact of the matter is that we've been trying for a couple of years to get to this number. And the work that I've been doing with A&I started out like on the periphery. No one really knew about it. And now it's kind of at the core of our improvement objectives. So that being said, there comes some expectations with that. And we're now looking at potentially 5,300 tons and perhaps more in 2020. Now, 2020 is a challenging budget climate, as you all know. So we've defined some very pointed initiatives. First of all, we're gonna start with a leadership value and sustainability set of initiatives, and its target is to remove variation in how we act between shifts, between crews, to try to stabilize production further. And it's going to focus on best practices with supervisors and superintendents, and really plan how they work and plan how they react to situations that arise in the mine. So of course, we're increasing focus on safety as we drive toward a more consistent production with less variation. Next slide, please. Then also to address that further increase in tonnage, we're adopting a short interval control mine management process. We have some technology in the background that's going to be an underpinning to that, but we're following up shortly to build and mature the coordinator function and the short interval control process at Hudbay. And standardization initiatives that will occur under that will build the maturity of the coordinator function at Hudbay, which is a new role to Hudbay. And then we will also do the same for scheduling, because we're going to be feeding tasks into this way of working. And we're also analyzing the data flow associated with that. And the benefits of these initiatives and the implementation of short interval control is going to show in our tons per day. We'll also see a maturity in the communication between supervisors when we change crews. And that'll be visible in, we'll speak less about logistics and we'll speak more about targets and what we set out to achieve, why we might not have achieved it, what we're doing to correct the course. And that's key to short interval control, is that you're trying to course correct more often than you normally would, because you have access to real-time information and you have a process to use that information. And of course, moving into beyond 2021, we'll be focusing on opportunities that can arise. So to sum up how things have gone with ANI since late 2018, the way of working we've settled into has gained credibility. We've settled into a methodology or a way of working to start by measuring the existing process performance. And that could be done remotely if we have good data. It could be coming a little closer to piece together the data that we can gather, or it could result in us actually putting people underground to observe processes being executed. And there was some combination of that done at Hudbay. Next, we'd analyze the process to determine its maturity level and what tool is right for the improvement initiative. Do we have a stability or lack of stability, or do we have a stable process that we can improve from a capability perspective? And look at its potential by removing internal constraints from a non-capital perspective. We employed a stability before capability improvement approach, making the best of what we have, which is what I just said about removing internal constraints without capital investments. And then we look at where further actions needed to be required. So thank you for listening to us today. If you have any questions, we'd welcome them in the Q&A afterward, and we'll also leave our contact information if you want to discuss it further. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks guys for attending our presentation. I do not see any questions yet on the tab. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. At the same time, just like previous times, we also had a couple of poll questions. I did not talk about it, I guess, in the beginning. I forgot, but this presentation was also part of the CIM paper archive. It's for 2020. It was slotted to be presented at the CIM conference. However, because of the COVID-19, they made it just digital, so it is available on their digital platform. So if you like to see more of these, I asked I poll questions on there to see if you guys are interested in that, because we've got quite a few presentations on these improvement topics. Let us know, and again, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them for any one of us on our part. And finally, I also have after this, the Meet setup, which the link is in the chat if you guys want to join us there. Mike, as we're waiting for the questions, maybe I will ask you one which I was thinking about. You mentioned, we're doing the leadership sustainability piece. How is that different than what we've already done in sustainability kind of things, right? Like Harun talked about that, we're doing response and control. Is it any different compared to that? What's your take on it, I guess?
Yeah, definitely as compared to what we've done before. So we settled into a nice way of working, of measuring how process is performing, and we do whatever is required to get the pulse of that process, and bringing people up and understanding that it's their barriers that we're trying to help them to get perspective and focus to remove. With the leadership initiatives, it's almost like a form of further cascading these changes beyond just the people who attended the Kaizen workshops. So that's evidence that there was a cascading aspect to the Kaizen workshops, and there was task management after of the initiatives. However, we're monitoring it to see how effective it was, and we're taking this step as another kind of step in the maturity ladder, but also to make sure that it gets across to those who were not in attendance of those workshops. Did that answer the question, Awesome?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's great that it comes from not ANI guys' mouths, but from a client side of perspective, because I think the difference, what you just mentioned, is the important part, right? Like you have to make sure that the structure, the organization also comes a level up with the initiative that you're doing, right? So one is to bring specific improvements in the operation, and then response and control helps us, sustain that. The leadership is all about enabling, right, and taking the next step. If you don't have that in hand in parallel, then it gets quite hard to keep that focus and sustainment. While I have you here, because we don't usually get client to come on the site on the webinars, I'll take the opportunity to ask you the question: how is the business, I guess, doing with COVID-19? You want to give us any insights on how things have impacted Hudbay or Lalor? How are you managing, for people to understand?
Well, Hudbay's had a very controlled response to this pandemic. We operate in different continents, so we've had different factors at play. But our Constancia mine actually was shut down for some time because of the situation in Peru. Mines and manufacturers were allowed to stay open, but suppliers were not. So essentially, you're shutting them down. So we took the decision to shut down with a couple of weeks of supplies. And we have since ramped back up, so that's good. We're back up to full potential. Meanwhile, we've had record production from Business Unit Manitoba during the pandemic, and the 4,500 has held. But it's been quite an effort from some very dedicated people. Like I've seen people stay on site for a full month. I've seen them have to isolate in another place for those 2 weeks, and then spend another month on site. So it's really the people that have come together, and management has put in place quite well thought out controls to reduce any possibility of transmission at site, and we haven't had. So things are pretty good in Business Unit Manitoba.
That's great, and just to add on to it, what I liked, obviously, being part of your improvement team, is the focus on improvement hasn't disappeared in this time either, right? Like the things are still happening. Initiatives are still moving forward. Whatever we can do remotely, we're still engaged. Like short and control, you talked about, it happened. It started within this time, and it's moving forward. We're already seeing benefits. So it's nice to see the commitment, even though things are not like they are in normal conditions. But because we bought into this way of operating, the operational discipline is still there.
Yeah, I think the key testimony there is that our people at site truly do own what we've been doing here. We didn't sit and tell them what we think needed to be done. Everybody at the mine pretty much knows what the issues are. What we simply bring is a methodology and a way of working, and the focus to study it to its root causes, and then to determine what level of reaction is justified based on how much it's costing the business. So ANI brings the statistical know-how and kind of the methodology, and the people are the ones who actually bring forward the barriers, and they truly want them resolved. So yeah, I haven't really seen a drop off in that activity, which has been surprising. I've been willing to back away because I understand it's quite a drain on people right now, but haven't really seen that.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I wanted to recognize the commitment that's been shown. I guess I don't see anything pop up here, so we'll probably end it here. Mike, thanks for joining and agreeing to do this. Hopefully, we can do these more in future and continue on showcasing the success that we might have at Hudbay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.